KZOM Radio presents Know Your Cryptids, an in-depth analysis and discussion of all the creatures of legends. Hosted by Matt Jarbo. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Know Your Cryptids. My name is Matt Jarbo, and I'll be your host through this journey of the weird, the unknown, the, history, and the explanation of several legendary creatures of legend. That's right, I said that twice. This episode is going to be dedicated to the far cousin of Bigfoot, the Yeti. And I've always kind of dug the Yeti. I think it's been around for a lot longer. The idea of that, the mythos has been around since before Bigfoot, but Bigfoot became more popular. But I think the Yeti is just creepier because the Yeti always kind of comes across to me as as more of like a brutal killing machine. I don't know why. I think of a Yeti, I think of the apes in Congo. Go figure. But we're not here for my opinion. We're here to learn more about the Yeti. So here we go. The Yeti, or abominable snowman, is an ape-like cryptid said to inhabit the Himalayan region of Nepal, India, and Tibet. The names Yeti and Mete are commonly used by the people indigenous to the region and are part of their history and mythology. Stories of the Yeti first emerged as a facet of Western popular culture in the 19th century. The scientific community generally regards the Yeti as a legend, given the lack of conclusive evidence, yet it remains one of the most famous creatures of cryptozoology. The Yeti may be considered a sort of parallel to the Bigfoot of North America. The appellation of abominable snowman was coined in 1921, the same year Lieutenant Colonel Charles Howard Bury led the Joint Alpine Club and Royal Geographical Society Everest Reconnaissance Expedition, which he chronicled in Mount Everest, the Reconnaissance, 1921. In the book, Howard Bury includes an account of crossing La Kapla at 21,000 feet, where he found footprints that he believed were possibly caused by a large, loping gray wolf in which the soft snow formed double tracks rather than those of the barefooted man. He adds that his Sherpa guides at once volunteered that the tracks must be that of the wild man of the snows, of which they gave the name Meto Kangmi. Meto translates as man-bear, and Kangmi translates as snowman. Confusion exists between Howard Bury's recitation of the term Meto Kangmi and the term used in Bill Tillman's book Mount Everest from 1938, where Tillman had used the terms mech, which cannot exist in the Tibetan language, and Kangmi, which, when retelling the coining of the term abominable snowman. Further evidence of mech being a misnomer is provided by Tibetan language authority Professor David Snellgrove from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London, who dismissed the word mech as impossible because the consonants T, C, and H cannot be conjoined in the Tibetan language. Documentation suggests that the term mech Kangmi derived from one source, and that is just that mech is simply a misspelling of mito. The origin of the term abominable snowman is rather colorful. It began when Henry Newman, a longtime contributor to the Statesman in Calcutta, using the pen name Kim, interviewed the porters of the Everest Reconnaissance Expedition upon their return to Darjeeling. Newman mistranslated the word meta as filthy, substituting the term abominable perhaps out of artistic license. As the author Bill Tillman recounts, Newman wrote long after in a letter to the Times, "The whole story seemed such a joyous creation, I sent it to one or two newspapers." History of the Yeti, pre-19th century. According to H. Seeger, the Yeti is part of the pre-Buddhist belief of several Himalayan people. He was told that the Lepcha people worshipped a glacier being as a god of the hunt. He also reported that followers of the Beyong region once believed the blood of the Migrod, or wild man, had use in certain magical rites. The being was depicted as an ape-like creature who carries a large stone as a weapon and makes a whistling sound. Up to the 1960s, belief in the Yeti was relatively common in Bhutan, and in 1966, a Bhutanese stamp was made to honor the creature. However, belief in the creature in the 21st century has declined. 19th century. In 1832, James Princep's Journal of the Asiatic Society of Bengal published trekker B.H. Hodgson's account of his experiences in northern Nepal. His local guide spotted a tall bipedal creature covered with long, dark hair, which seemed to flee in fear. Hodgson concluded that it was an orangutan. An early record of reported footprints appeared in 1899 in Lawrence Waddell's Among the Himalayas. Waddell reported his guide's description of a large ape-like creature that left the prints, which Waddell thought were made by a bear. Waddell heard stories of bipedal ape-like creatures, but wrote that none, however, of the many Tibetans I have interrogated on the subject could ever give me an authentic case. On the most superficial investigation, it always resolved into something that somebody heard tell of. 20th century. The frequency of reports increased during the early 20th century when Westerners began making determined attempts to scale the many mountains in the area and occasionally reported seeing odd creatures or strange tracks. In 1925, N.A. Tombazi, a photographer and a member of the Royal Geographical Society, writes that he saw a creature at about 15,000 feet near the Zimu Glacier. Tombazi later wrote that he observed the creature from about 200 to 300 yards away for up to a minute. Unquestionably, the figure outline was exactly like a human being, walking upright and stopping occasionally to pull some dwarf bushes. It showed up dark against the snow and, as far as I could make out, wore no clothes. About 2 hours later, Tombazi and his companions descended the mountain and saw the creature's prints described as similar in shape to those of a man, but only 6 to 7 inches long by 4 inches wide. The prints were undoubtedly those of a biped. Western interest in the Yeti peaked dramatically in the 1950s. While attempting to scale Mount Everest in 1951, Eric Shipton took photographs of a number of large prints in the snow at about 20,000 feet above sea level. These photos have been subject to intense scrutiny and debate. Some argue that they are the best evidence of Yeti's existence, while others contend the prints are those of a mundane creature that have been distorted by the melting snow. It should also be noted that Eric Shipton was a notorious practical joker. Peter Byrne reported finding a Yeti footprint in 1948 in northern Sikkim, India, near the Zimu Glacier, while on holiday from the Royal Air Force assignment in India. In 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay reported seeing large footprints while scaling Mount Everest. Hillary would later discount Yeti reports as unreliable. In his first autobiography, Tenzing said that he believed the Yeti was a large ape, and although he had never seen it himself, his father had seen one twice. But in a second autobiography, he said that he had become much more skeptical about its existence. During the Daily Mail Snowman Expedition of 1954, the mountaineering leader Angelo Jackson made the first trek from Everest to Kanchenjunga, in the course of which he photographed symbolic paintings of the Yeti at Tengboche Gompa. Jackson tracked and photographed many footprints in the snow, most of which were identifiable. However, there were many large footprints which could not be identified. These flattened footprint-like indentations were attributed to erosion and subsequent widening of the original footprint by wind and particles. On March 19, 1954, the Daily Mail printed an article which described expedition teams obtaining hair specimens from what allegedly to be the Yeti scalp found in a Pangboche monastery. The hairs were black and dark brown in color in dim light and fox red in sunlight. The hair was analyzed by Professor Frederick Wood Jones, an expert in human and comparative anatomy. During the study, the hairs were bleached, cut into sections, and analyzed microscopically. The research consisted of taking microphotographs of the hairs and comparing them with hairs from known animals such as bears and orangutans. Jones concluded that the hairs were not actually from the scalp. He contended that while some animals do have a ridge of hair extending to their back, no other animal has a ridge running from the base of the forehead across the pate and ending at the nape of the neck. Jones was unable to pinpoint exactly the animal from which the Pangboche hairs were taken. He was, however, convinced that the hairs were not of a bear or anthropod ape. He suggested that the hairs were from the shoulder of a coarse-haired hoofed animal. Beginning in 1957, wealthy American oilman Tom Slick funded a few missions to investigate the Yeti reports. In 1959, supposed Yeti feces were collected by one of Slick's expeditions. Fecal analysis found a parasite which could not be classified. Cryptozoologist Bernard Havelman wrote, since each animal has its own parasites, this indicated that the host animal is equally an unknown animal. The United States government thought that finding the Yeti was likely enough to create 3 rules for American expeditions searching for it. Obtain a Nepalese permit, do not harm the Yeti except in self-defense, and let the Nepalese government approve any news reporting on the animal's discovery. In 1959, actor James Stewart, while visiting India, reportedly smuggled remains of a supposed Yeti, the so-called Pangboche hand, by concealing it in his luggage when he flew from India to London. In 1960, Hillary mounted an expedition to collect and analyze physical evidence of the Yeti. He sent a supposed Yeti scalp from the Kumyang Monastery to the west for testing, whose results indicated the scalp was manufactured from the skin of a sirah, a goat-like Himalayan antelope. Anthropologist Mira Shackley disagreed with this conclusion on the grounds that the hairs from the scalp look distinctly monkey-like and that it contains parasitic mites of a species different from what was recovered in the sirah. In 1970, British mountaineer Don Whelans claimed to have witnessed a creature when scaling Annapurna. According to Whelans, while scouting for a campsite, he heard some odd cries in which his Sherpa guide attributed to a Yeti call. That night, he saw a dark shape moving near his camp. The next day, he observed a few human-like footprints in the snow, and that evening viewed through binoculars a bipedal ape-like creature for 20 minutes as it apparently searched for food not far from his camp. 21st century. In 2004, Henry Gee, editor of the journal Nature, mentioned the Yeti as an example of a legend deserving further study, writing, "The discovery that Homo florensis survived until so recently in geological terms makes it more likely that stories of other mythical human-like creatures such as Yetis are founded in grains of truth. Now cryptozoology, the study of such fabulous creatures, can come in from the cold." In early December 2007, American television presenter Joshua Gates and his team from Destination Truth reported finding a series of footprints in the Everest region of Nepal resembling descriptions of Yeti. Each of the footprints measured 13 inches in length with 5 toes and a measure of 9.8 inches across. Casts were made of the prints for further research. The footprints were examined by Jeffrey Meldrum of Idaho State University, who believed them to be morphologically accurate to be fake or man-made. Meldrum also stated that they were so very similar to the pair of Bigfoot footprints found in another area. Then, during the 3rd season, mid-finale visit to Bhutan, Gates' teams found a hair sample on a tree that they took back to have analyzed. After it was tested, it was concluded that the hair belonged to an unknown primate. On July 25, 2008, the BBC reported that the hairs collected in the remote Garo Hills area of northeast India by Deepu Marak have been analyzed at the Oxford Brookes University in the UK by primatologist Anna Neckaris and microscopy expert John Wells. These initial tests were inconclusive, and ape conversion expert Ian Redmond told the BBC that there was similarity between the cuticle patterns of these hairs and specimens collected by Edmund Hillary during the Himalayan expeditions of the 1950s and donated to the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, and announced planned DNA analysis. The analysis has since revealed that the hair came from a Himalayan goral. On October 20th, 2008, a team of 7 Japanese adventurers photographed footprints which could allegedly have been made by a Yeti. The team's leader claims to have observed Yeti on a 2003 expedition and is determined to capture the creature on film. A group of Chinese scientists and explorers proposed to renew searches in the province, which was the site of the expeditions in the 1970s and 1980s. So the Yeti's been around for, it seems like, longer than Bigfoot, but as always, we never know if it's out there or not. I am curious to hear if you guys out there believe in the Yeti or believe in Bigfoot or believe in any of the creatures we'll be discussing on this show. Please find us on Twitter at KZOM Radio, Facebook at KZOM Radio, and of course the soon-to-be-created kzomradio.com. My name is Matt Jarbo. Thank you very much for listening, and tune in for the next episode where I will be discussing the Chupacabra. Have a great day.